Hello everyone, welcome back to Age of Nagash, which is a channel dedicated to Age of Sigmar. In today's video we're going to be looking at the second article put up by Warhammer Community talking about the Battletome, Legions of Nagash and the Legion of Sacrament. So, let's see what they have to say about it. Death armies have long been renowned for the magic in the lore of Warhammer Age of Sigmar and the world that was. There's something particularly stirring about the thought of covens of necromancers releasing howling gaze of Amethyst magic on the battlefield and armoured vampire lords dispatching foes with amorphine lightning. In Battletome, Legions of Nagash, the aforementioned forces of death more than live up to their reputation with two new laws, a powerful new magic ability to combine them with, and a whole legion designed to harness them to their full potential. Okay, so that's a good start, just learning about what this article is going to be about. Very interesting to hear about what the magic's going to be like, and two new laws, so that's sounding more like every death wizard will get access to a spell from these laws, not just Nagash, what it kind of sounded like at the end of the last video. Okay, it goes on to say, magic in Legions of Nagash. Legions of Nagash provides death players with a wider range of magical spells than ever before, thanks to two new spell laws. Don't worry, your favourite spells are still in the game, and rest assured, Arcan can still unleash the horrifying curse of years upon his foes. Instead, the new laws of the dead add to your toolbox of spells and open up new options for your army. Death mages from your army, such as the humble necromancer, will be able to sap the vigour of your foes with the lore of the death mages, while vampire lords will be able to unleash magical wrath with the lore of vampires. Meanwhile, death lord wizards will be able to choose from both. So that's really good. It makes sense, death lords being able to choose from both lords, as they are, the lords of death. They should be able to have access to both, especially Arcan, so that's good to hear. Necromancers being able to learn from the Death Mages lore, which makes sense, I suppose, because they are from the Fraction Death Mages, and I imagine it's more fairly basic necromantic spells, maybe not as powerful as the Vampire Lords, but we'll have to see on that one. Hopefully the Mortis engine will be made into a wizard. That would be lovely to see, because it's in Death Mages, but it's not a wizard, which is just a bit unusual to me, I find, so making that a wizard would be awesome. Then it says, whichever lore of the dead you're using, you'll benefit from the Locus of Shaiish. Cast any spell from any lore on a 9+ and you'll get to resolve the effect twice. Easy enough for Nagash with his 3+ bonus to casting, or a nearby Mortis engine and Corpse Cart for Balefire Brazier, boosting your other wizard's abilities. One particularly nasty spell to try is the Soul Harvest, a spell that draws the life of nearby foes towards the caster. Okay, so we'll get to that in a minute, but I just want to say that is really good. So if you cast a 9 or more, which isn't that hard to do, I thought it would be like a 12+ or something, you get to resolve the spell's effect twice. So I imagine if we just do a spell that we all know, like Arcane Bolt, you get to affect the D3 mortal wounds on an enemy unit you pick. So I imagine you would get to do that twice on the unit you picked, so 2d3 mortal wounds. However, as it says, whichever lore of the dead you're using, these are probably just for the death magic spells, to be honest. Thinking about it probably won't work on that. But however, if there are mortal wounding spells, you'll be able to double the effect, which is really nice. And on a 9+, and like it was saying, Nagash gets +3 to cast in, Arcan gets +2 to cast in, and then it already said what I was going to say as well, by getting a Mortis engine and a Corpse Cart with a Balefire Brazier, which I have talked about in my previous videos, in the Death Mages videos and the Deadwalkers, talking about how you can really boost your casting to really help your magic effectiveness throughout the game. Right, now let's get back to the spell it was about to tell us about, Soul Harvest. The caster summons a ghostly scythe which slices through their enemies, cutting a cord, tearing spirit to flesh. Soul Harvest has a casting value of 7. If successfully cast, each enemy unit within 3 inches of the caster suffers D3 mortal wounds. Then roll a dice for each mortal wound that was allocated to an enemy unit and not negated. For each 5+, heal 1 wound that has been allocated to the caster. Okay, so this is pretty nice, especially for casting value of 7. It's not particularly hard. It's the average on 2 dice, so you're going to be getting it, well, 50% of the time. So that's a pretty good one. Now, if I'm looking at the previous paragraph here, it says the Vampire Lord's spells will be more sort of aggressive. Now this isn't aggressive, this is a offensive spell, but also allows you to regenerate. So I'm thinking maybe this is going to be for things like your Necromancer and just trying to think, and the Mortis Engine if it gets made into a wizard, but the Death Lords will be able to take this as well, so it's a really good way to really regenerate your wounds back, especially if you're talking about the Death Lords with their regeneration anyway, if they kill an enemy model. So yeah, so enemy units within 3 inches of the caster suffer D3 mortal wounds. So if you get, if you take this spell with someone like, let's say, Neferata, and you really get her into combat, and it's not too hard to have more than one enemy unit within 3 inches. To be honest, it's fairly easy, especially how a lot of battles can turn up to a mash-up in the middle of the board. So it's more than likely you'll get this off, and certainly on 1 unit, potentially 3. So that would be 3 sets of D3 mortal wounds, and then for every a third of the total mortal wounds you cause, you'll be able to heal back 1 wound, which is really good. And especially how we just mentioned the what was that rule called? It was the Locus of Shaiish. So if you cast this, you need a 7, but if you cast it on a 9, it looks like you'll be able to resolve this twice. So that will be each enemy unit within 3 inches of the caster suffer D3 mortal wounds twice. So that is very nasty. Really liking the sound of that. So, and then you're also healing a third of the mortal wounds you're dealing to the enemy, as long as they are not negated. So yeah, you can heal loads of wounds back with that. So that's really good. Obviously, you're going to see how well this works in the game, and it might not go to plan. You know, I'm sitting there saying it is really good, but by the sounds of it, this sounds great, and especially for a casting value of a 7. It's yeah, that's good. That I think I will be taking that one. Of course, I can't wait to see what the other spells are, but I think that will be one to keep right there. Especially with the Locus of Shaiish ability, that is really good. Okay, and then it goes on to say, whether you resolve this once or twice, you'll be able to deal horrific damage to the foe while keeping a more valuable caster, like a Mortouch, like I was saying with Neferata, alive for longer. And then it goes on to say, vampire wizards, on the other hand, okay, so I was right. So this is going to be more for the Soul Harvest, which we just talked about. It's going to be more for the Necromancers and then Mortarches who take this spell. I really hope the Mortis Engine gets turned into a wizard, like I say, because otherwise it's just Mortarches and Nagash, I would think, would be able to take from both laws, which is great. You know, that's to be fair, that's already 5 wizards, 5 different wizards who will be able to take this. It would just be nice if, aside from the Mortarches, you'd be able to take this spell with someone else apart from a Necromancer, because if a Mortis Engine can take the spell, it has 12 wounds, and being able to regenerate via the spell would be very nice. And also, it's got that once per game regeneration anyway, so be quite a tough 180 point model that. So yeah, so sorry, that's the Soul Harvest spell. I'll get back to where it says Vampire Wizards, on the other hand, will find Amethyst Orb, a risky but powerful way to blast a hole through enemy battle lines. Then goes on to tell us what it does. So the Amethyst Orb, the wizard hurls a pulsing globe of pure necrotic magic, which turns flesh and bone to ash in an instant. Amethyst Orb has a casting value of 7. If successfully cast, pick a point on the battlefield within 12 inches of the caster and draw an imaginary straight line 1 millimeter wide between that point and the closest part of the caster. Roll a dice for each unit, friend or foe, apart from the caster, that has any models beneath this line. On a 4+, that unit suffers d6 mortal wounds. Okay, so this is sounding very nice, especially with your vampire lords, a lot of them having wings or horses. They can very easily get onto the flank of two battle lines crashing together, and just position yourself slightly forward from your troops and then draw this line 12 inches down, which is more than likely going to cover more than one enemy unit. Obviously just be careful not to get your own, and then you've got to get a 4+ to do the d6 mortal wounds, and you've got to cast it on a 7. So it's you need a 50% chance to cast it if you're not having any bonuses, and then it's also a 50-50 if you get to do the d6 mortal wounds. So the key here would be to affect as many enemy units of this as possible. If you do though, and let's say you manage to cast with the Locus of Shaiish ability a 9 or more, you'll be able to do the effect of this spell twice. So I imagine you'll be able to roll twice for each enemy unit it crosses, and your own if you're unfortunate enough to do that. And then on 4 it does the d6 mortal wounds. So it makes it a lot more likely chance you'll get this through. And if you are lucky and you do it twice because you've got the Locus Shaiish ability off, you're doing 2 lots of d6 mortal wounds, and each one of those units, if you're really lucky, and I mean, we could go, the full way and say if you're really, really lucky, you'll be doing, if you get it off twice, you'll be doing 12 mortal wounds to those units, which I don't know how often that is. I don't know what the average is. What, like once in probably about 20 games or something, you might get that off. But, it's a lovely idea, and even if you don't get that, if you just get the 1 d6 more wounds, that is very good, especially compared to what we have in the moment for death anyway. I mean, the most offensive spell we have is, obviously you've got Hands of Dust from Nagash, but that's only for instant killing 1 model. Probably Curse of Years, well, it is Curse of Years, the most offensive one. So it's definitely nice to get a more offensive magic into our armies rather than just supportive. So that's very nice to see. It then goes on to tell us about the Legion of Sacrament. If you're looking to take full advantage of the new spells in the Legions of Nagash, you'll want to use the Legion of Sacrament, the army of Arcan the Black. The Legion of Sacrament are notorious for their mastery of death magic, and many mages in the mortal realms make the long pilgrimage to Shaiish to learn from Arcan himself. On the tabletop, the Legion of Sacrament gains additional bonuses to cast a small but welcome ability that increases your chances of activating the Locus of Shaiish. Okay, the bonus is called the Black Disciples. Friendly Legion of Sacrament wizards may add 1 to casting rolls. So yeah, that's really good. Normally that's just a fairly mediocre ability. I mean, sure, it will help, but the main reason why I say it's really good here is just because that Locus of Shaiish ability that if you cast on a 9 or more, you can do the effect of your spell twice. And I think that it will remain to be seen when we start playing with the new Battletome, but I think this could be a real thing to start targeting for, especially if you're taking the Legion of Sacrament. This is going to be a big thing you want to try and activate all the time to make the most of all your magic, especially if there's some wizards out there who can only cast 1 spell, the majority of them. So you really want to really make the most of the one spell they cast. Or if they're immortal and they can cast multiple spells, you really want to do the most horrific things as possible. It goes on to say, meanwhile your gravesites will be even deadlier thanks to the Masters of Teaching, an ability that can turn dead enemy units into fresh reinforcements for your army. And then goes to tell us what it does. The Masters' Teachings. Whenever an enemy unit is destroyed, before removing the last model, you may pick one of your gravesites within 6 inches of that model. Roll a dice, then remove the model. On a 4+, you may pick a friendly summonable unit that has been destroyed, and then set it up again, wholly within 9 inches of that gravesite and more than 9 inches from the enemy models. Okay, so bit unsure about this one. It does sound good, but I don't know if you're going to have to pay reinforcement points for this, which is really the swing here, because if you don't have to pay reinforcements, this sounds really good. Of course, I think this is going to be one of those things where you'll get away with it the first few times when you play against your opponent, but your opponent will then realise what this does and will make his own units around that gravesite. So it'll be impossible for you to set up a unit wholly within 9 inches of it and then more than 9 inches away from the enemy. I think that will be a thing they'll definitely clock onto and then try and neuter this ability, which would be a shame, you know, obviously, for you being the death player. However, though, if they're worrying about neutering that ability, they're not worrying about other things like taking objectives and so on. But if you've got to pay points for it, it's like something again. Sometimes it can be worth it. I mean, depends what unit you're going to bring back, to be honest, you know, if you really need to. But it's a toolbox, you know, you've got it as an option. There is, of course, a chance that you're not going to have to pay reinforcement points for it, and the whole summonable keyword is going to play very differently. How it doesn't require points, but it requires you to do certain things in the game. Or I know the Maggot King of Nurgle have recently got a ability in their Battletome that allows them to bring units onto the board that don't additionally cost points. They cost their own sort of points called contagion points, but they don't. But contagion points aren't part of your 2,000 point army, shall we say. They're like an extra thing you generate throughout the game. So it'd be interesting to see if Death generate summonable points throughout the game. If they do it that way, so you're not paying traditional army building points for it, then yeah, this could be absolutely awesome. Bringing back like whole units that have been destroyed. Like, I'm already thinking about, well, I say thinking about, I'm going to be taking units of like 20-man Graveguard units, but think about maybe taking units of 30 Graveguard. And if the enemy don't have really anything within range of this gravesite, it's going to be very hard for them to stop me setting all these models up on the table. So this could go two ways. Could go you have to pay normal points for it, so then it gets back to the normal summoning where it, you know, it's not even like you guarantee it, because you have to roll on a 4+, and once your enemy clocks on to know what this can do, they'll make sure that the last model in a unit that gets wiped out is not within 6 inches of a gravesite. And then, like I say, you need to get a 4 more to do it, and then you've got to pay points for it as well. Then I don't see this ability being used too much. It could have its uses. Again, it's just the toolbox, so it's nice. But if it is going to cost a new type of point called, what I would imagine would be called summonable points, this could be really good, and I am very much looking forward to hearing more information about this. I don't know if we'll hear much more until the Battletome is actually released, until we can actually look into the book. So that's something to bear in mind. Sounds amazing, but bear in mind it could cost you know, reinforcement points to do this, essentially. But yeah, so we'll look at that when we get more information on it. It then goes on to say, in this way, armies serving under Arkham will benefit from both the endless regeneration provided by Deathly Invocation and their grave sites, as well as sudden spikes in later game when you begin to wipe out enemy units. We'd recommend fielding your army as a castle based around the grave sites in your territory, battering the enemy with a hail of magical spells should anyone get close. Well, that's when you can unleash the Black Gem. Okay, the Black Gem, we'll have a look to see what it does. Black Gem, when this obsidian crystal is shattered, it unleashes a raging spectral cyclone that snuffs out the life force of those who feel its chill bite. Once per game in your hero phase, you can declare that the bearer will shatter the Black Gem. Pick a point on the battlefield within 8 inches of the bearer. Roll a dice for each unit within 3 inches of this point. On a 6+, one model from that unit is slain. If the unit has any models with wounds allocated to it, then that model must be the model that is slain. Okay, so this is just going to be a bit situational, this one, because yes, it does affect multiple units within 3 inches of the area you pick, and believe me, you would generally be able to pick more than one unit with this, because 3 inches is actually a large, radius. So, but it's on a 6-up, and if you go against a non-sort of elite army that the enemy has, they don't really have any monsters and stuff like that, it's not, and you go against a lot of 1 wound models, then this artifact really doesn't work well at all. So even if you get your 6-up, you're just killing a 1 wounded model. However, if you go against an elite army, let's say Stormcast with their Retributors or with their Draconian Guard, being able to kill one of those models can be very nice, can be very good. Also, it's important to mention that there are units out there with only 1 model in the unit, which would be things like behemoths, monsters, named characters, a Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon, a Frost Lord on Stonehorn, even things like Archaon himself or Alariel or the Celestin Prime. These really big sort of monsters or characters that can generally be very tough to kill, like a Mongol, for example, or a Stardrake. The list goes on. This will affect them as well. So, yeah, being able to wipe out, let's go for the best example, shall we? Being able to wipe out Archaon by rolling a 6+ is very good. I mean, the chances are you're not going to do it. I mean, even if you get 3 units within range of this ability, the odds are you're not going to be able to get it off once. However, this would be one artifact I would tell your opponent you have, and I would tell them exactly what it does. Even if they don't ask, I would tell them what it does, because it's more than likely the ability isn't going to go off, because it's only once per game, remember. But it starts playing like mind tricks and psychological warfare with your opponent, because your opponent is, let's say he has, won't go for Archaon because not too many people field him, but let's go for a Frost Lord on Stonehorn. If he has one of those in his army, and you've just told him what this artifact does, sure, only on a 6+, his thing will die, but he will start doubting the chances of you failing this role. He will start thinking, if he puts this model anywhere near this character who has this artifact, there's a chance that Stonehorn could die before it does anything. So he's not going to be willing to take the risk with that. Even that, like I said, such a small chance of it happening. He doesn't need to really to worry too much. But because you've told him what it can do, and you've told him it can instantly kill his big, lovely monster, he's going to be a bit more reserved with it. So it's all about having ball control, which this artifact can provide. I don't think this is going to be the strongest artifact out of the ones we can choose. And when I mean I don't think, I mean I hope it isn't, because it is very situational. I mean, I'm thinking if, because I play in quite a few tournaments and stuff, and the big thing about that is you don't know what armies you're going to be fighting, so it could be a complete surprise. You can't rely on fighting elite armies or monster-based armies. So especially how I was going to say there's a horde meta at the moment. There's not so much as you would think, but people's armies are generally becoming more and more models to catch your objectives. However, if you play in your local store and you know what your opponent's army is, you know if they've got a Beast Core Raiders army or an Ogre army even, or you know, an elite Stormcast or just an elite army in general, this artifact could be good. Could be a good one for you to take. And like I said, might not sound the best. However, it gives your opponent plenty to think about when they're putting their monster near this character. So it says the Black Gem is a high-risk artifact, but one that well worth taking for the moments when it works. Just be careful not to leave your friendly units too close. Okay, so they didn't specify this in the description of it, but this will affect your own units as well, so that is something to consider. They say it's a risky artifact, you know, no surprise there, because like I've just been saying, the chances of getting this off are very low, and it will affect your own units, so that is something to bear in mind as well, which makes it a bit worse, to be honest. I'm surprised they didn't specify the rule roll a dice for each enemy and friendly unit within 3 inches. That would have cleared up a bit more, but you know, you take it because it could be fun. It could be, especially if you know, like I was saying, your opponent's got a few monsters in his army. This would be really fun. I mean, when it works, when you get that 6+, you know, it'd be worth it every time, just because it would be fantastic just to see monsters disappear. Especially if you gave this artifact to someone, let's say the only one who could really take an artifact in your army is a necromancer. Having such like a small hero like that be able to just instantly kill monsters would just be hilarious. So I'll be looking forward to seeing some people use this in game. Then goes on to say, if you're looking to play more defensively, the wristbands of black gold are a great choice, helping to shield your more valuable characters from getting shot down. Ideal for a vampire lord on zombie dragon. So let's see what this thing does. Wristbands of black gold. These ornamentally crafted wristbands act as negative lodestones, deflecting incoming arrows, bullets, and even cannonballs. Roll a dice each time you allocate a wound or mortal wound to the bearer in the shooting phase. On a 4+, the wound is negated. So yeah, this is good. Obviously, it depends if you're fighting a shooting army. The reason I say it's good is because a lot of the time you are going to be fighting shooting armies, especially if it's in a tournament. So a 4+, ignoring, so 4, you'll just be ignoring 50% of the damage they do to you, plus Deathless Minions, so that's you'll be ignoring 50% of the damage, and then you'll be ignoring a 6 of the damage on top of that as well. So definitely with good things like a Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon, because the reason I stopped taking mine was just because he got shot down too quickly within a couple of turns, which is a real shame. So this is something I'm definitely going to try out with him just to make him more survivable. So yeah, that's a really nice ability there, especially how a lot of these abilities, a lot of these artifacts are like on a 5-up, he ignores it, so on a 4-up is really nice, especially how it will stack with Deathless Minions. Then it goes on to say, if you're looking to truly master the magic of death, you'll want to take the Lords of Sacrament War Scroll Battalion, a formation centered around Arcan, a Mortis Engine, and a Coven of Necromancers. Each unit in the battalion is shielded from attacks by the Mortis Engine, while they will also benefit from being able to cast an additional spell each turn. While this formation might consume a good number of points, it will be sure to catch your opponent off guard, and is a great way to pay tribute to Nagash's greatest pupil. Okay, so this sounds interesting. So it says it's going to be an expensive battalion, but we don't have many battalions, so I will take any battalion they've got. And it's interesting, so it's obviously very necromantic, I think is the word. So you've got Arcan, so the big badass of necromancy, apart from Nagash. You've got a Mortar's Engine, which I'm really hoping is going to be made into a Death Wizard, but we'll have to wait and see on that one. And then what's interesting here is a Coven of Necromancers. Now that could just be a word they're using just to describe multiple necromancers in this battalion, or a Coven of Necromancers could be potentially a new thing where if you have so many necromancers, like I don't know, 3 or something, they get additional bonuses. But I doubt that. It's just a nice sort of idea, because I think there's a Coven of Engineers for Clan Scryer, which gives you additional benefits in a battalion. But it's probably just a collection of necromancers, and it's just a word they use for it. So that's not much. Just having an Arcane Mortar's Engine and a necromancer. So we don't know how many. Probably at least, or be at least 2. Probably about 3, I imagine, would be the number. So yeah, and then it goes to say you'll be able to cast an additional spell every turn. So I imagine that's for each wizard in that battalion, and if that is so, that's Arcan now casting 3 spells, being able to choose from either of the 2 new magic laws, and that is each necromancer traditionally only casting 1 spell, which Vanhel's Dance was a popular one for that, because Vanhel's Dance, as I talked about before, let your mainly it was a skeletal unit be able to pile and attack twice. And that was usually your go-to option with the Necromancer, because you could do a Mystic Shield, but his spell was better. But now you can do 2. You can still do your Vanhel's Stance, and you can do a Mystic Shield, or one of the new spells from the Death Mage's lore, which will be very interesting to see those. So, yeah, what you get from this is, I think it was just to, yeah, so you can just cast an extra spell every turn for presuming each Death Wizard in this battalion, because it costs a lot of points, and that's the only thing it's telling us it does. So yeah, that'll be interesting to see. I'm looking forward to seeing the wording on that one. And then it goes on to say, all wizards in a Legion or Sacrament army know an additional spell from one of the Laws of Dead. Okay, so that's good. Doesn't mean you can cast an additional spell, but it means that if you have the Necromancer, he can choose from the Law of Death Mages, it said, but now it's saying the Laws of Death. Okay. Let me just think about this. So, all wizards in the Legion of Sacrament army know an additional spell from one of the Laws of the Dead. I think this is still in place. So necromancers can only do Death Mage's law. That would make sense. And then if you had vampires in this army, they can obviously go with the vampire law. But whatever law they're picking from, they'll be able to pick an additional spell as well. So they'll be able to pick 2 spells per wizard. So if you're looking at, a necromancer, that means he'll be able to have a choice of Mystic Shield, Arcane Bolt, Vanhel's Dance, Macabre, and then 2 extra spells, which would give you plenty of choice, especially how if you have Arcan this army. And I think if you're taking the Legion of Sacrament, you need Arcan because he's the head of it. It makes narratively sense. He can do 2 spells normally, and he knows Curse of Years, he knows Arcane Bolt, Mystic Shield. He'll be able to know 2 extra spells from either one of these 2 Death Lords we've got, and he also knows all spells by Death Wizards within 18 inches of him. So he'll also know the spells which you've picked for your Necromancers, your Vampire Lords, and so on. So he will have a huge range of spells in this, and particularly this brings me to Nagash, and this is what I had thoughts of before, is that if there were going to be a new Death Laws for Magic in the new Battletome, Nagash is famous for having his 8 spells that he can do every turn, but because of the rules of 1, they're often wasted. But him being able to, if he can go in the Legion of Sacrament, which I would hope he would, because he's the, you know, the biggest death wizard there is, of course. You know, he's the master necromancer. He'll be able to pick 2 additional spells. He already knows 2, so you're looking at, well, he already knows 2 of his own. So in total, he's got Arcane Bolt, Mystic Shield, Hands of Dust, Soul Stealer, I believe it's called, and then 2 additional ones from the lore of the dead. Now, it doesn't stop there, because he will also know all spells from your death wizards on the battlefield. So Nagash is going to have access to an enormous library, I think is the best word to describe it, of spells at his disposal. And I know, like, if let's say you give your necromancer a certain spell, and you wanted the necromancer to be able to use a spell, but if Nagash does it, the necromancer can't cast his additional spell. He's, you know, the one he picked from the list. However, Nagash being able to do it for him, he gets +3 to casting, so it's got a lot more chance of going off. And if it goes off on a 9+, he gets to do the Locus of Shaiish ability that does the effect twice, which is really, really good. It's sounding very well, especially if you had a Mortar's Engine and then the Corpse Cart will give you both +1 to casting. And the Gash gets +3, remember, so he's getting +5 to casting. So to do the Locus of Shaiish ability, you need to roll a 4+ on 2 dice. Which isn't too hard to do, let's say. I mean, if you fail that, you're extremely unlucky. So, yeah, that is really good. I can definitely see how Nagash is sounding more and more worth taking, because he's 800 points at the moment. He started at 900 points, and I think Games Workshop realised that's far too many points for him. They dropped him down to 800, which was a very good points reduction. But he's still very expensive for most armies, even in a 2,000 point army. So you can definitely see his use as being a lot more effective now. So yeah, I'm really liking how that's all sounding together. It then goes on to saying, fancy destroying your opponents by more direct means. The Legion of Sacrament represents just one way to play your army with the new Battletome. Check back tomorrow when we'll be taking an in-depth look at the Vampire Elite of the Legion of Blood. Okay, that sounds interesting. That sounds to me like Neferata, as she is the Mortarch of Blood, and I think her one is called the Legion of Blood anyway, from what they've mentioned before. And I do like Arcane a lot. I've recently just built and painted one a week ago, so I'm very excited to use him and find out how good he can be in the Legion of Sacrament. But my favourite has to be Neferata. Out of all the Mortarches, she is my she was the first one I built, so that's why I like her so much. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what she will do in the Legion of Blood. I've based my whole narrative of my Death Army around her. I've got a lot of that sort of lore written down and all that sort of thing. I'm very much into the lore of my own personal army. So it'll be great to see how she is now going to play on the tabletop with her Legion of Blood. So yeah, that'll be definitely a good read for tomorrow. And then summarising today's article, what I can say by looking at this is that Death Magic is going to get a lot more potent. Tzeentch was the dominant army in the hero phase using magic, and I'm not saying Death is going to go above Tzeentch here, because Tzeentch is still very much on the pinnacle of magic. But Death will now be able to give him a run for his money, especially with how many extra spells we're getting. And it's just the Locus of Shaiish, where if you cast and your casting rolls are 9 or more, you get to do the effect twice, is really, really good. Like I would still be happy if they didn't slip that one in here. So that is a big extra bonus for me personally. we get that. We also get a few of the spells we're going to get. We get told that, you know, we get the Black Disciples ability if we're in a Legion or Sacrament, which gives the wizards in that army add 1 to casting rolls. We also get told that we can pick an additional spell from both lords for our wizards, and we get told about a couple of artifacts, like especially wizards aside. We've got the wristbands of black gold, which, like I said, you can put on your zombie dragon, and your vampire now has a 4+ ward save on that big nasty of a zombie dragon, which is going to be saving against 50% of the damage, and that's in the shooting phase. And you're going to take so many shots at a big model like that in the shooting phase. You really want to have an artifact like that. So it's looking very good so far. When I first saw these Legion War Scrolls, I wasn't particularly happy, you know, because I was used to how death was, and I saw the change here and I wasn't liking it. But now we're going more and more into other parts of how death is going to change. It's looking a lot better. I mean, I hope you're getting excited too, because I most certainly am. And it's like I said in my review of those War Scrolls that are leaked, we can't, you know, judge the picture of what death is going to look like in the future when we only had like a quarter of the photo to look at. It didn't, you know, it's not a fair judgment. So by looking more and more into these articles until the Battletome comes out, we're definitely going to get a much better view of what death is going to be like in the future. And as each one of these I read, I am getting a lot more appreciative of the changes coming and how they are going to help us. So I hope you've enjoyed that video, and if so, please like, subscribe and comment down below. And until next time, Nagash is all and all is one in Nagash.